In this lesson, we will be working with domain naming master. The objectives of this lesson is to find out what actually happens when we add or remove a domain. From there, it allows us to understand the roles of the domain naming master. And finally, we sum up the lesson with the keynotes. So what actually happened when adding a new domain to an AD forest? As you know, to add a new domain to an AD forest, we need to promote a member server to become a domain controller. Then the DC promo process on the member server will need to contact the domain naming master to add a new domain. The domain naming master will have to check in the partition container in the configuration database for the information of the new requested domain. If the new requested domain is available, it adds the new domain partition and the domain DNS zones partition to the partition container, and then it informs the DC promo process on the member server to continue. Let's verify the current partitions in our AD forest. To do that, we need to open the ADSI edit tool, and here we need to right click and click connect to and select the configuration, then click OK. Here we expand the configuration and select the partition container, and here are all the partitions in the current AD forest itlifeskills.local. Here we are on a member server that have been installed with all the required roles to make it a domain controller. Now let's promote it to a domain controller of a new child domain ncsa.itlifeskills.local. To do that, we need to click on the exclamation point and click on promote this server to a domain controller. Then in this Active Directory domain services configuration wizard, we select the option add a new domain to an existing forest. And in the parent domain name, we type in itlifeskills.local. And in the new domain name, we type in NCSA. Then we click on the change button to provide the account information of the account that is a member of the enterprise admins group. To make it simple, we use the administrator account of the root domain itlifeskills.local, and we type in the password, then click OK. And here we click next. Now we need to type in the directory services restore mode password, and we type in the same password in the confirm password box, then click next, then click next. Here it will verify the NetBIOS domain name, and in this case it must be NCSA. Here it is, everything looks good, click next. In the path, we keep all the default paths, so click next. And here we click next. Now it will perform the prerequisites check. Everything looks good. Let's click on install. Since we add a new domain, so after we click install, the DC promo process will contact the domain naming master to add a new domain. If no conflict found, the domain naming master will add the partitions to the partition container, then inform the DC promo process to continue. So everything looks good. The installation has been finished successfully. Let's close and then click on close. And we need to wait until it reboot. And that's it. We have just promote this server to become a domain controller of a new child domain ncsa.itlifeskills.local. Let's now verify the partitions container of the AD4S itlifeskills.local. To do that, we need to open the ADSI edit tool. And here it is. Let's click on the partitions container. As you can see, the domain partition for the domain ncsa.itlifeskills.local and the application partition of the domain DNS zones of the domain ncsa.itlifeskills.local have been added to the partition container of the AD4S itlifeskills.local. So what happened when we remove a domain? As you know, removing a domain must be conducted on the last domain controller by selecting the option the last domain controller in the domain, which make the DC promo process of the current domain controller to contact the domain naming master to remove the domain. The domain naming master will check in the partition container for the information of the domain. If found, it removes the domain partition and the domain DNS zones partition of the domain from the partition container and inform the DC promo process of the current domain controller to continue. Let's now remove the child domain NCSA from the Active Directory forest itlifeskills.local. To do that, we need to click on Manage and click on Remove Roles and Features. And here we click Next. And here we click Next. And here we uncheck the box Active Directory Domain Services. Then click Remove Features. And here we click on Demote this domain controller. Then here we need to select the option the last domain controller in the domain, then click Next. And here we select the option Proceed with Removal, then click Next. Here we select the option Remove Application Partition, and we also select the option Remove this DNS zone. Then we can view the partitions. Everything looks good, so click OK. Then click Next. As you know, after we demote the domain controller, GPVDC11 will become a member server. So we need to type in the local administrator password. So we type in the password and confirm password, then click Next. Here we click on Demote. As you know, we remove the domain, so after we click Demote, the DC promo process will contact the domain naming master to remove the domain. The domain naming master will then make sure the current DC is the last domain controller of the domain. Then it will remove the partitions of the domain NCSA from the partition container and inform the DC promo process of the current domain controller to continue. So everything looks good. Click on Close. Then click on Close. That's it. We have just removed the child domain ncsa.itlifeskills.local successfully. Let's now verify the partitions container of the Active Directory forest itlifeskills.local. To do that, we need to open ADSI Edit tool and select the partitions container. As you can see, the NCSA domain partition and the domain DNS zones application partition of the NCSA domain have been removed. This is the end of this lesson. Let's read the keynotes.